welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now in our 22nd episode of 2025. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast. Yesterday, our friends at Broadband Breakfast reported that West Virginia's broadband office presented a final BEAD proposal that delivered 100% fiber to every single unserved and underserved location in the state of West Virginia. $150 million below the budget provided by NTI. And after meeting with Commerce Secretary Ludnick, West Virginia's Governor Patrick Morrisey delayed West Virginia's rollout by 90 days and mandated that some fiber locations be taken off the map and replaced with alternative technologies such as LEO satellite. It appears that the voters of West Virginia are outraged. They want their fiber, and resulting in the governor responding in an op-ed in the Herald Dispatch, trying to explain his actions are being consistent with the program changes being proposed by the Trump administration. And we'd love to see what those program changes may be. But, it's really hard to imagine any state more desperately in need of fiber, economic development, jobs, education, and world-class healthcare. What a tragedy. The West Virginia Broadband Office in delivering a plan to take care of rural West Virginia, and the politics could potentially leave some families behind. On a more positive note, we're just days away from FiberConnect 2025 in Nashville, which kicks off on Sunday, June 1st. We have set a new registration record, yet again, 5 years in a row. So if you haven't registered, please go to fiberbroadband.org under events and register today. You're not going to want to miss this special event, and it is going to be epic. After FiberConnect 2025, the Fiber Broadband Association will continue to work its way around North America. So far, our regional FiberConnect workshops have been held in San Antonio and Philadelphia, have been sold out, and our next regional workshop will be in Anchorage, Alaska on July 17th. And then after Anchorage, we'll be in Toronto in August, Spokane in September, Scottsdale in October, Kansas City in November, and we'll end the year with our premier member meeting in Palm Springs, December 8th and 9th. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Juliet Fink Yates, Broadband Infrastructure and Digital Inclusion Manager for the Office of Innovation and Technology for the City of Philadelphia. Discuss PHLConnectED, Phil Empowered, and linking families to opportunities. But before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from the team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Very much, Gary, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We appreciate it. Before I go over a few logistics, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, as participants, you are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please type it into the question box, which is located within the control panel on the side of your screen. We will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. And you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to respond. We really appreciate your input. And with that, I will pass things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David. Good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber Breakfast, our guest was Mike Sanders, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Broadband Office, who discussed Fiber Forward, Oklahoma's bold path to statewide connectivity. And Mike discussed the Oklahoma legislators' bold mandate to reach 95% broadband connectivity with fiber before the broadband office sunsets in 2028. So if you missed that session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Juliet Fink Yates, Broadband Infrastructure and Digital Inclusion Manager for the Office of Innovation and Technology for the City of Philadelphia, to discuss PHLConnectED, Philly Empowered, linking families to opportunities. Juliet has worked on addressing digital equity since 2001, when she managed a small nonprofit ISP for 10,000 low-income Philadelphians. In 2010, she wrote in collaboration with some of the City of Philadelphia a broadband stimulus grant that brought $5.4 million to low-income communities to set up public computer centers in 77 locations. She is one of the founders of the Technology Learning Collaborative, Philadelphia's first professional development organization dedicated to digital literacy practitioners. She joined the City of Philadelphia's Office of Innovation and Technology in March of 2020 and leads the city's Digital Literacy Alliance, a coalition of digital inclusion leaders and seed fund for innovation digital inclusion programs. As the broadband and digital inclusion manager, she has worked on major initiatives to close the digital divide, including the PHLConnectED program to ensure all pre-K students have internet access, the city's digital Navigator network to ensure all residents get help accessing low-income internet and devices, bringing fiber, Wi-Fi, and computers to rec centers, and developing a citywide broadband infrastructure strategic plan. So welcome, Juliet. And for audience, please type in your questions as we go, and we'll work those into the Q&A at the end. With that, I will pass it over to Juliet.
Really pleased to be here. I thought I'd take a few minutes just to go through a couple of our programs in a little bit more depth, and then I'll open it up for your questions. So if you want to go to the next slide. Our office, the Office of Innovation and Technology, is really responsible at the city for coordinating efforts around broadband and digital inclusion across the city. And there's sort of 5 major programs that we manage and run. And this is not inclusive of all the things that the Free Library of Philadelphia does, or our Parks and Rec system does, or our adult education system and the Mayor's Office of Education. There are components of this work happening all across the city. What we're trying to do is sort of link and coordinate across those efforts. So the major thing we do that was mentioned is our Digital Literacy Alliance. This we created actually over 10 years ago now. And it was a seed fund that came out of our Comcast franchise agreement that allowed us to put funds in a nonprofit outside of the city that's called the Philadelphia City Fund. And we use that to distribute small grants to local organizations across the city doing innovative digital literacy work. One of the coolest things that we did was during the pandemic, we rapidly moved money to start the very first digital Navigator program, both in the city and one of the first in the country, which I'll talk about in a little bit as well. We launched our Digital Navigator network in 2020. It's become one of the biggest things we do, serving thousands of people. And then at the same time in 2020, obviously during the pandemic, we launched our biggest initiative, PHLConnectED, which is really our initiative to get every single pre-K through 12 student household connected to the internet. We have worked very hard on figuring out how to distribute thousands of devices to families in need, because that is what we find is one of the biggest issues in Philadelphia that families say, is that they really struggle to afford an actual large screen device, a laptop or a desktop within their own home. And then finally, we've been really leveraging our resources to figure out how we can light up our own facilities across the city and create Philly free Wi-Fi in every recreation center and in every public space that we can. So those are some of our major initiatives. And if you go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about each one. The big one, in which we're going to talk about today, I think, is PHLConnectED. This was a really extraordinary effort during the pandemic that brought together philanthropy. It brought together our major ISPs, the school district, 68 different charter schools, the independent mission schools, and multiple offices across the city. It provided, at the time, free subsidized internet connections through Internet Essentials, and then hotspots through T-Mobile. Those now, it has gone through many iterations. And during the Affordable Connectivity Program, we transitioned most of our Internet Essentials through Comcast accounts to ACP. We maintained hotspots, which is what we do now. And I'll talk about a little bit about the future and what we're trying to do moving forward. But it would not have happened without partnerships with our local education agencies who pushed communications out. The district was constantly pushing communications out. And then our coordinating partner, the United Way, who stood up the 211 hotline for us as a really an entry point that every household could call to get enrolled in PHLConnectED, to schedule a digital navigation appointment. And then the final component that we added to PHLConnectED was really scaling up our digital navigation services, because what we found was even once folks got called and got a code to connect to the internet, they struggled to actually take the next step, which was get the actual internet in their home. And so they really needed support. So that digital navigation services became really a lifeline for many families. You can go to the next screen. So our digital Navigator program really acts as this digital support staff, like a case manager that provides both remote or in-person one-on-one support around accessing and using technology. We've served thousands of folks. We have 4 organizations that we fund through our digital navigation program in different corners of the city that serve slightly different populations, but they are also required to serve anybody who calls them from across the city of Philadelphia. And our focus is really on helping folks get internet access, helping folks find a free or low-cost device, helping them enroll in digital skills training, and providing kind of one-on-one support in at the moment needs that they have. So our digital navigators, we separate them from digital literacy providers that often run classes, multiple sessions over time. Our folks are really focused on getting folks connected to the internet. Next slide. I talked about some of the work we've done for Philly free Wi-Fi. This has been a really big initiative this year. With our Verizon franchise agreement, we were able to negotiate that Verizon would provide every Philadelphia Parks and Rec location with gigabit symmetrical high-speed internet, the Meraki Wi-Fi platform, and then an additional 2 strands of dark fiber for our own city purposes and use for smart city initiatives or other initiatives that the city needed to create redundancy and to support our infrastructure. We have lit up 78 sites so far out of 180 that we're aiming to hit in 2 years. So we are moving along really quickly. And when we say those are lit up, it means the fiber has been installed, the Wi-Fi is working. You can go and get that Wi-Fi on your phone if you need it, or the computers at those sites can log in with that Wi-Fi. We love this because it's really scalable, the fiber. And then when we launched it, we launched 2 tools called, and I can drop these in the chat at some point, but called the Philly Free Wi-Fi Finder, which is a very simple tool of which sites are actually active. So anybody can go look on a map and find a location near them to get Wi-Fi. And we also launched something called the Philly Free Wi-Fi Dashboard, which is much more robust and has things like ACS data pulled into it. So those in the field can look and see kind of which sites haven't been lit up, which ones that we're working on, which areas are those sites located in, what's the internet access in those areas. You can see a whole bunch of other metrics there. Next slide. Our latest initiative, and we have an event today, is called the Power Up Tour. And this is really enabling folks to get access to computers and digital skills training. And so we are going to every council district, there's 10 in the city, and hosting an event where we distribute 50 laptops for free in partnership with PCs for People. Folks go to these events, they attend a workshop on online safety, and we use a platform called North Star Digital Literacy. They receive their laptops, they get a little bit of training when they walk away, and then they're offered more training after the event that they can log into with their laptops. And so we're really excited about this. And we have another one today that we plan to do in our District 8. And I think that covers most of our programs. So I'll pause there and hand it back.
Thanks, Juliet. So let's start with, with the, I guess we've kind of hit 2 things. One is the, affordability connectivity program, the FCC's ACP. Was not funded again, and also the cancellation of NTI's digital equity grants. So what would your advice be to the broadband offices across all 56 states and territories and all other cities and your colleagues around the country on how do they move forward without, to make sure that broadband's affordable to low income and anybody that needs to get on it. And also, it's kind of like, the rural electrification. You can't just roll out power and expect everybody to know what to do with it. And so, when you have people that haven't participated, in the digital economy? How do you onboard those people?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I've always said that, Philadelphia is really fortunate. We have fiber, everywhere. We are not unserved or underserved in that regard. But what we do know from years of doing this work is that just because you build the system doesn't mean it's easy for folks to connect or afford to connect. So that affordability component was incredibly valuable. The ACP, 185,000 Philadelphians were signed up for it, right? And what we're already hearing is that some folks are already falling into debt and losing their internet access because they can't afford $9.99 or $15.99 or $20 a month for their internet access. So you're always going to have those folks. And I think we in every broadband office should be thinking about what is affordability, what are the mechanisms that we can support helping folks with affordability. And I think there's a lot of different and interesting ideas coming out of there. I mean, there's some ideas where folks are introducing, and I hate to talk about taxes, but introducing a small tax on when you purchase a device that would go to a fund that could help then folks either get devices or get internet connectivity. I don't think that we have to subsidize everybody in perpetuity. Potentially, but you could do emergency subsidies like utilities do. I mean, that's very common. Every utility when somebody's about to be shut off, for example, often has a mechanism where you can get a small grant to help stave off that shut off of that utility, and that keeps folks connected. So it's this helping figure out how we can keep really vulnerable, subscription vulnerable populations on the internet, because losing internet, these days, everybody talks about it. It's no longer nice to have, but I like to think of it as the substructure that allows you to do everything else now. So, without it, you can't actually your health appointment, or without it, you can't get access to, the kids can't do school, right? So we know that now. I think that the goal should be trying to figure out what are those low cost options that, we can help that every ISP could have ideally, and what does that look like, and how do we do that, and what are the mechanisms that we can help subsidize folks who really can't afford it, even if it's a short-term emergency subsidy.
Also, citywide hotspots, being able to have Wi-Fi to everybody. Unfortunately, when you're a city like Philadelphia or any big city, you have quite a lot of homeless people, and I do notice that homeless folks have cell phones and are desperately looking where can they charge it and where can they get connectivity. But also first responders, I see police officers having to sit in front of McDonald's to be able to connect, first responders and so forth, trying to find internet connections. Can you speak to kind of what your experience has been, the fact that you've gotten, community Wi-Fi so pervasive across Philadelphia?
So I think this goal is, and the goal is for it to be ubiquitous and easy for folks to find a place to access. I do think, for our homeless population, sometimes that phone is the only thing, it's their only lifeline to any sort of services, so that they can get in touch with their medical provider or their social worker or whatever it is that they need to do. And so they don't have the data and the minutes on it. And so being able to actually find a Wi-Fi location where they don't have to use down their data can be really critical for them, or where they can plug in. It's really for them that lifeline. But for everybody, I think what we see for families, low-income families, is we see that struggle of keeping their phones on and making sure that they have enough data to get through the month. That's not new, and it's pervasive, and it's really hard for families to be able to. Teachers can't get in touch with parents if their phones are off, right? Or if they don't have the data to get the phone, right? So the phone call. So that is a really important issue. And so we want to make it as easy as possible for folks to have access in many different places, and be able to leverage that when they can. I think, and obviously our first responders, there shouldn't be any part of the city where they can't get access to that information, to their cellular phones. So, our goal is to figure out the public spaces And then once you figure that out, there's so many other applications that you can do. I mean, we have the FIFA World Cup coming. There's all sorts of exciting, the 250th anniversary of our country is coming. And so once you kind of enable that public Wi-Fi, there's so many other, applications that the city could use for events and programming, and that communities can tap into. It opens doors.
I mean, when I was in Philly for our event, just walking around town, you have so many tall buildings that are so densely packed. My GPS didn't work very well. And so I would think that first responders or anybody, just being able to leverage Wi-Fi for GPS, and, just you can't rely on your cell phone because of towers. Is that something that you guys had seen? Or
I don't think we've heard it in Center City as much. I think that it becomes a little bit tricky. We have heard it when you get kind of more into the neighborhoods, where things can be a little bit more spotty. We have heard some of that, or where there's a degradation of service to the home, even where we've seen that comes in fits and starts.
So you've been doing this for nearly a quarter century, and can you describe kind of what your observations of, the impact to the families, and how many households do you think that you've been able to impact over this last 24 years?
Oh man, that's a big question. How many households have I been able to impact? I like to think thousands. I mean, at PHLConnectED, over the course of 4 years, we have been able to provide subsidized internet connections to over 23,000 Philadelphia households. So that is, multiple people within those homes who are being supported. Our digital navigators, like I said, have supported over 6,000 residents who have spent, one-on-one time with them to help them get connected. We've distributed thousands of devices over these past years. We're putting in computers in, libraries and recreation centers, so that after-school kids can and the camp kids can have access to them, and communities can have access to digital literacy training. So, I mean, we really are talking about thousands. I will say, in Philadelphia, we're a big city, right? And so there's a lot of work to do. We still have, according to the most recent census data, about 28% of residents still don't have home internet, and about 25% don't have a laptop or desktop at home. 28% of residents is really about 102,000 people who still don't have internet in Philadelphia. We are working really hard to make sure that everybody is aware that they have this ability to access the programs that are there for them. But it's very hard to subsidize 102,000 people who don't have internet in their homes. I mean, that is not something that, that is something that the ACP did, and that's a real loss that we feel.
So what about the difference between a smartphone and a laptop? I mean, how do you determine what's best for these families that you're trying to get connected?
So I think everybody, the smartphone is your mobile device where you can take it with you. And I think many folks are very comfortable using smartphones, and it's kind of their number one priority. They want to make sure they have a smartphone to do the basic things that they need to do. And I would probably be in the same position as them. But I think everybody knows that a smartphone is not a device that you can do everything on, even though we may be able to do 80% of the things that we want to do on it. I certainly cannot, write a cover letter or a resume or format a resume on a smartphone, right? It's sometimes, depending on the type of platform you are doing to submit your benefits, it's actually not mobile friendly. And it's actually really hard to do it on a smartphone. And everything often requires you to, upload documents, which you have to find from your potentially saved somewhere. So for many folks, a smartphone can do many things, but it simply can't do everything. And I don't think any of us would, if I said, okay, we're going to put away your laptop, you're not allowed to have a laptop anymore, that would be a choice that we would feel comfortable with. to not have a large screen device in our own home. And so, there are, when we take a look at who has need for those, I mean, we're really looking at families who are have children in the home who might need to do homework, but also adult learners. So they're enrolled in a digital literacy program or an adult ed GED program or a workforce program. These are folks who are gonna need a laptop in order to take the next step. And then we're talking about other folks who are, that may be the only thing that they need. That device may be something that they need for their business because they're trying to get started and change their lives in some way. So I think it really depends on the individual situation. Our program, you have to be at 200% or below the poverty line to receive a laptop. So we have eligibility requirements for who would receive those devices when we distribute them.
So when you do, when I used to be on the board for Teach for America, and a lot of our schools gave laptops to the students and so forth, and it's a pretty big IT task. How do people, how do you make sure that people can maintain these laptops and help them? Obviously, everybody becomes a little IT person when they, are starting to work with these devices, especially people who haven't used them in the past.
Yeah, so I think that is tech support is one of the most important things that folks actually don't consider when they roll out these programs. And so for us, it was really important that folks could get that support. Obviously, for schools and school systems like the Philadelphia School District, they have a big shop where they can maintain. They provide Chromebooks to every student during the school year. They don't provide them. The students can't take them home over the summer because they need to, update them usually during that time and get them ready for the next year. So, big districts and schools, often they have a system. Smaller schools, a single school may have trouble maintaining those devices, and tech support we heard from the schools is a big issue. And then individuals, often what you hear from folks is when we ask them about whether they have a device at home, it's, do you have a working device at home? Because sometimes they may have an old device that's not working, and they just haven't figured out how to make it work or get it to the tech support, or they don't have the money to get it fixed. And so when we've rolled out our program, one of the reasons we work with PCs for People is they provide a 1-year warranty. They have a help desk that folks can call. They have a location where folks can come and drop off the computer and someone can fix it. We also have our digital navigators that can help with, the difference between, is it a break fix problem? Like, is it a virus and you need to reformat the hard drive? That's a little bit more complex. Or is it just that somebody doesn't know how to use the computer and they got stuck because they think it's broken, but it's actually not broken, right? And so that level of tech support, our digital navigators can help with typically. And then the sort of more break fix, we need to reformat the computer. We can, if it's distributed through our PCs for People partnership, they can provide some tech support there. But that is a really critical component, and folks should try to figure that out.
Well, I think you have a high density city, and so you have the benefit of at least 2 world-class providers with Verizon and Comcast that seem like they've been integral to helping you fund your programs. Can you talk a little bit about those, in the few minutes we have, in the minute we have left of,
Yeah, we have great partnerships, particularly with Comcast, with Verizon, with T-Mobile, with AT&T. We talk with those folks all the time. We've been really fortunate. Comcast for PHLConnectED, their foundation contributed a large amount to help us really kickstart that PHLConnectED program. And then through Verizon, through the Verizon franchise agreement, and somebody had asked this question, so I'll just bring it up here real quick. We do franchise agreements for cable franchise, regularly with the city. That Verizon and Comcast, because they provide cable services, have to go through the city to renew their cable franchise agreement. Now, cable is not the same thing as broadband. But we have been able to work with both Comcast and Verizon during those cable franchise agreements to negotiate a variety of services for the city. And so That means that we've been able to negotiate really great rates for Verizon to build out this iNet for our Parks and Rec through their Verizon franchise agreement, through that negotiation process. Similarly, the cable franchise agreement allows us to negotiate with Comcast about something else that the city might need when that franchise agreement comes up. So these are mechanisms that the city has to think about the services that we need and how these two world-class providers can help us meet those goals.
Well, that's fantastic. And Juliet, we just really appreciate your dedication and service to the people of Philadelphia and everything you're doing to get these families connected and on board, participating in the digital economy. And I want to thank everybody for joining us and look forward to getting back together next Wednesday with James Fieger, the Senior Vice President of Product Segments at Lumen Technology, to discuss connecting our artificial intelligence future. That's going to be from the stage at Fiber Connect, so you're not going to want to miss that. So I hope to see everybody down in Nashville Sunday through Wednesday, and we'll see you guys again next Wednesday. Thanks again, Juliet, and congratulations on everything you've been able to accomplish in Philly.